Hey everybody, welcome to the morning market briefing. It's Wednesday, February 18th, 2026. Hope you're doing well out there. Lots to talk about today. We're going to open up with Japan. A coming $550 billion of investments come into the U.S. as part of the trade deal with them. We're getting further detail, Ben, on just kind of how that's going to look and what's going to be going on, starting with up to $36 billion in U.S. oil, gas, and critical minerals.
This is it's interesting. We thought that this deal was probably going to come, although it's with any of these deals that have been signed over the last year, the proof is in the pudding when finally things start to break ground and actually construction begins. And it does seem to be the case that construction is beginning on a few of these facilities. So the first is that the lion's share is going to be this natural gas facility in Ohio. It accounts for about $33 billion of the initial $36 billion commitment, and it's actually going to be led by SoftBank, which isn't a Japanese national entity, but it is a Japanese company. The second is going to be a deep water crude export facility in the Gulf, and that's going to be about $2.1 billion is what the Japanese are going to invest, and it could represent about $30 billion in annual U.S. crude exports. In Trump's truth, he said it's going to be an LNG facility, but it's not. It's a crude export facility. And then the third is going to be, and that's going to be operated by Sentinel Midstream. And then the third is going to be a synthetic industrial diamond manufacturing facility right here in the state of Georgia.
Peach State Diamonds.
So it's going to be a $600 million investment, so much, much smaller than the other two. De Beers subsidiary Element 6 is going to be running the project. What diamond is used for is in a host of industrial applications. Actually, Schlumberger SLB in the oil and gas sector actually has has a diamond business for drill bits. Because it can get through rock because of its hardness properties. So you see diamond grit used in semiconductors, automotive, and energy sectors. And so that is the critical mineral that will be produced and refined here in the state of Georgia. So the diamond factory of the world is moving to Georgia. At least one of them is. So that's $600 million. The big one, though, I'm curious about what your all thoughts are on this, is the natural gas facility in Ohio. This would be plugged right into the Marcellus and Utica shale basins in Pennsylvania and New York, and would be able to process all this natural gas and convert it to power. And indeed, the amount of power that could serve 7.5 million homes is the equivalent of 9 nuclear reactors. And to which I say, why would you build a nuclear reactor for $15 billion when you can have 9 at a much lower risk, much lower net cost for $33 billion? So I think that's a curious development that I'm interested to see how it progresses over time, because I do think natural gas facilities are the way to go and a way to achieve a lot of this power more rapidly than nuclear.
Yeah, you wonder if this is not just kind of a non-broadcasted continuation on reversal of previous green energy initiatives. Much has been made, especially over the last 13, 14 months, of environmental causes and what's changed there. And the reality is this is, I think, a more traditional commerce-led access point to the energy.
I think if anything, it puts us on the right foot. Marco Rubio had his big speech this week about basically we want to be friends with the Europeans, but they keep hampering themselves. And one of the ways they've hampered themselves is by things like the net zero initiatives and shutting down all the nuclear facilities. And now they're completely beholden to Russia for energy, which we saw at the beginning of 21 when the war broke out in Ukraine. And they're still allegedly buying, non-legal forms of energy from Russia in order to keep the lights on. And I think this is just energy independence is a real major factor here. We need to be generating enough energy to, one, sustain everybody, two, bring prices down because the data centers are sucking up a lot of energy. When we saw it with the CPI last week, that electricity is rising faster than just about anything on CPI, and a lot of that is the fact that we're using so much more power. So we need to be more focused on how do we accomplish our goals rather than how can we make sure that we're being the most environmentally friendly. I mean, I was listening to a podcast last week. It was some guys talking about the UK where, they're really doubling down on the net zero thing, and you're going to get taxed for how far you drive and all these different things. And they're eliminating all combustion vehicles by 2035, but they produce less than 1% of the carbon emissions for the entire planet. So even if they got to net zero, it would be absolutely a non-mover for the entire world in terms of carbon output. So
also the interesting thing with the electric vehicles, I know we're going on a little bit of a tangent, is it's not just the impact of fossil fuel emissions from a vehicle. It's also the amount of wear and tear you're putting on the roads and the cost that imposes on. I mean, you're going to have to resurface the roads more often. I mean, these are much heavier vehicles. For example, a battery pack in one of the Tesla semis is about 12,000 pounds. The limit for a legal and there's an exception for electric vehicles, but there's an 80,000 pound weight limit in the United States that you can be on the highway with. And for electric vehicles is 82,000. So having another 12,000 pounds, you're going to have to make up the weight somehow, and you're just going to be less efficient because you're going to be able to haul 15%
of your weight is the battery.
Yep.
And people are very concerned about microplastics, but what they are not concerned about is the microcarbons that come off of tires. I mean, that's, they always say the closer you live to a highway, the worse your health is. And it's not necessarily from the emissions, it's from the particles that are thrown off by the tires. And that's a very often overlooked piece of it. But I mean, why, when your tire degrades, that goes somewhere. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not in the air and you're not inhaling it. So if you have heavier cars ripping up tires faster, then there's going to be more, literal rubber in the air.
Force equals mass times acceleration. I mean, you have accidents that are going to be more. I mean, there are just a lot of unintended consequences. I'm not saying this is like terrible situation, but
it's not pure and clean. It's
exactly.
Not 100%. You've got a coal-powered vehicle or a natural gas-powered vehicle or a nuclear-powered vehicle. However you're getting the power, it's still coming from an energy source that has a body count.
And from an economic perspective, I think it's very interesting that the Japanese could have. There's plenty of nuclear projects that have been proposed in the United States that the Japanese could have invested in.
They're like, nah.
We're going to do a $33 billion natural gas facility in Ohio instead.
Yeah.
And
a crude export facility.
And when you think about the third world, it's like you tell some guy in Botswana he can't have a combustion vehicle. I mean, he's not, first of all, not going to be able to plug it into anything. Then he's also not going to be able to afford it. And so what you're doing is creating a massive wealth gap. And if those people can't leave the third world, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to burn wood to heat their home, which I would argue is probably the least efficient way to keep carbons out of the atmosphere and leads to deforestation. I mean, there are no free lunches in economics or in life in general, and that's something to think about as well.
I think it's interesting, and I view this deal as very representative of this administration's agenda in terms of what they are trying to accomplish. And I find it noteworthy that it's not really getting all that much coverage. I'm glad we led with it. Tom, you alluded to electric prices. We talked a lot about inflation last week, but there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect, at least narratively speaking, in terms of what is happening with inflation around the world and what's happening in the U.S. And I think that it really belies the underlying data. It seems very obvious to everyone around that inflation is coming around elsewhere and maybe not as obvious that it's coming down here in the U.S. Would you agree, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, there's a headline, and maybe, Hicks, you can get that pulled up. Bloomberg came out with a story today that says UK inflation is coming down rapidly. It'll be around 2% by April. They just posted an inflation print that saw the core go from 3.2 to 3.1. The headline went from 3.4 to 3. Meanwhile, we're sitting and Bloomberg's clapping and applauding that the UK has really handled inflation. Meanwhile, the U.S. is at 2.4%, and everyone's talking about why it's so sticky.
I mean,
and there's definitely a disconnect there, and I think a lot of the same dynamics that are happening in the UK. There are some nuances with the government policies, but if you look at the bulge in inflation that we had in the middle of last year and that the UK had as well in the middle of last year, we saw exactly the same thing. So all of the base effects that they're talking about in the UK, we also have in the United States, as you can see on the chart there. So, I think that, but for whatever reason, U.S. has been characterized as sticky inflation, and everywhere else in the world is characterized as inflation's coming down.
It's what's interesting too is that they don't have any commentary on the fact that the central bank of the UK often has dissenters. Like when we started getting dissenters on the Fed, it was like, oh, Trump's ruined the independence. They're doing it to
how dare they not all agree?
Yeah, but they've been doing it the whole time. If anything, I would say they're the most intellectually honest central bank. And I would point you to another podcast. I listened to this yesterday, but Bill Maher's podcast, Club Random, he had Adam Carolla on, who I've been a fan of since I was about 11 years old when he was on The Man Show. But wildly different political views between the two of them. But they had an interesting come together, which is that for some reason, the U.S. compares itself to a country that does not exist. We're constantly like, man, we could be better. We've done all these terrible things. Everything we do is wrong. But, the Seahawks won 13 games this year and won the Super Bowl, but they're not out there being like, well, it would have been better if we'd won every game. Like we should really think about how we need to come together and think about all of the things we did wrong this year and really focus on those losses 100%. Because we look at Europe and we're like, man, Europe is awesome. They're so great. Man, everywhere else in the world, these countries are so great. It's like, okay, well, why is everyone trying to come here? Why are they trying to be like us? We're comparing ourselves to a team that's never lost a football game and never lost the Super Bowl, and that country doesn't exist. And it's this self-flagellation, I think, is just insane. It was a pretty interesting sort of tangent they went on, but I was like, man, this is an interesting way of looking at it because, Bill Maher obviously left, Adam Carolla, I would argue, centrist, but now right as a result of the shift. Coming to be like, why do we do this? Why is this thing where we're like, we look back and we're like, well, we're obviously awful, terrible people, and we've never done anything good because there's some magical Atlantis out there where they didn't have any social or economic problems in the history of their country. But we act like Europe has that. But Europe, earmuffs for our European listeners, kind of stinks.
Yeah, I mean, notably, you use the Super Bowl illustration. Every Super Bowl has been won by an American team.
Yeah, 100%.
And nobody is talking about that.
Not a single world champion has come from Manchester.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty notable. We're getting some interesting dynamics. Kind of New York City is top of mind. Last week we talked about some of the challenges with Washington State and threats of businesses leaving Seattle, but the New York City budget situation is getting a lot of coverage, and I think rightfully so. It's pretty interesting trying to see how they're going to navigate this. Already we are seeing some companies start to make announcements in terms of departures and moving, and it seems like Florida's about to get real crowded. But in New York City, Mamdani is basically leaning on Governor Kathy Hochul and saying, hey, we've got to figure out a way to make this work, and we might have to raise property taxes 9.5%.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a suicide pill that he's trying to take. And we have the tweet up, I think, here. But essentially what he said is either Kathy Hochul can give New York State money to the city, or the city's just going to raise property taxes, and which is not very popular. They'd also need city council approval to do it. They'd raise property taxes by 9.5%, which is, I mean, that means rents are going to go up. That means that groceries are going to go up.
I thought we were going to get free rent, free groceries.
And I mean, like this is the issue that you have when you have a lot of these policies. And I'm a little bit surprised that Mamdani's doing this so early and indeed going against the city council, because the city council has been adamant saying that they're not going to raise property taxes like this. So I'm a little bit surprised because I think it's a bit of a political miss. If I had been Mamdani and I wanted to triumph my Democrat socialism, what I would have done is I would have made some surface level tweaks, maybe had a few blocks with free childcare that demonstrated that it really didn't cost any money, and then just lean on what is an improving economy and improving tax revenue to say, see, I did it, guys, and the world didn't end. But instead, he's pushing this, and I think he might be overplaying his hand here. So we'll see how this evolves. But if he continues down this path, I think that he is not long for the office.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the budget is up 55% in the last 10 years.
It's not a revenue problem.
It's not. I mean, when you look at the financial sector alone, they've been able to drive up revenue for the city consistently. It's just a pure spending problem. And
I'm curious, does it have any impact? Does that have any impact, Tom, on the bonds that we buy in New York City or the credit worthiness of the?
I mean, I've really avoided adding a lot of new New York paper. If I am, I would lean towards what they call PIT bonds, personal income tax, which are a payroll tax. So when you pay in New York, you pay state, local, or federal, state, and local taxes. So you pay, if you live in the city of New York and earn in the city of New York, you pay, and it's bracketed, but it's like, the first 50,000 is like 3.3%, and then I think everything above that is 3.8%, and those go to pay directly the PIT bonds, and those are AAA. The GOs I've been leaning away from. We do have some exposure there, but a lot of those are older. Waters I think would probably still be okay, and then sort of the general state of New York I still feel fine with, but we've been really slowing our New York City bonds. They traditionally are very expensive because there's a lot of internal demand because people make a lot of money there and they want to avoid that PIT tax. But I mean, this is what happened with Detroit, and obviously it's early in the game, and Mamdani is not permanent. But Detroit used to be a city of 2.5 million people. The auto industry moved to Mexico after the NAFTA agreement, and then a lot of people left. And well, what do you do in order to satisfy the debt of a city of 2 million people when now you have 1 million people? Well, you raise the property taxes because you have to make up that shortfall somehow. Well, then you end up with a city of 500,000 people. And what do? They raise the taxes again. And now you've got the debt of a big city with the population of a small city, and you go bankrupt. And that was what happened in early, call it 2011, 2012, was Detroit was really on the rocks. They had to restructure a lot of things because, you've got these water bills, but now there's a lot less water use. You've got these general obligations, but now you've got property values that not only are going down, but you're having to raise the property taxes on them. And people would just abandon their houses. I mean, that was the whole thing, was that parts of Detroit were being regentrified by bears in the early 2010s.
And it should have been lions.
And that's what happens, is like you start squeezing people enough, and then you end up with an empty lemon. All the juice comes out and there's nobody left.
And the difficult thing for New York City, so I mean, I even to a lesser extent, using an analogy, is Seattle. When Seattle had proposed a $275 per person head tax, and Amazon said, "Okay, we're moving to Bellevue, which is like
over $275.
Yep." And
what if you're a conjoined twin? Is that two heads? Or is that?
So I mean,
I think you get a discount. It was only going to be $500.
But you think about New York City, and not only can you New Jersey is a ferry ride away. I mean, it's so easy not only to just change cities, but to change states if you really wanted to. And I think that they're discounting that substitution effect, which could be pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, you can get to Connecticut pretty quick too.
Yep.
I mean, there's a number of states you could go to. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to be very popular. I mean, we already saw Palantir announce they're leaving for Miami, moving their headquarters last night.
Zuckerberg bought moved from California, but he just bought a massive compound in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, these taxes are not popular, and the thing is, when you talk about who pays the taxes, I mean, That's what pays the taxes.
What's
in
amazing to
California.
me, and I no one loves criticizing the big J journalists out there more than the boys, but as recently as within the last week or so, I saw multiple tweets from journalists mocking the notion that wealthy people and corporate entities would flee New York because of Mamdani. And these jokes were being made 6 weeks into his tenure as mayor before anything of substance had been proposed or done. And here we are now. There's going to be an impact.
I would say, I agree with you, Andrew, and I think that ultimately that will, his bluff will be called, I think. Because I think that New York is too big, it's too powerful. Even the city council, if he is successful with this, then I think that it's a non-starter, and I think you see a lot of the ththings that you're talking about. And if he's unsuccessful, just kind of looks like he looks very small and kind of a lame duck.
The thing is, a lot of these companies, it's not like they don't have landing spots. It's not like places like Florida and Texas have not risen to having their own ability to operate business. Most of Schwab's trading, at least on the fixed income side, is either, I think, in Dallas or Denver. And, they've got the Texas Stock Exchange up and running, the Y'all Street. Think about...
Schwab's a great example, and I'm not saying this is right, wrong, whatever, but when we first started a, professional custodial relationship with Schwab back in 2013, their headquarters was in San Francisco. And then shortly thereafter, and I'm not even saying for political reasons, but just showing the agility of some of these really large companies, it was in San Francisco. Then shortly thereafter, it was in Arizona. Now it's in Westlake, Texas. In 12, 13 years, the most staffed headquarters of Charles Schwab Company has been in 3 different places. And
you'd be stupid not to.
And it hasn't impacted the customer experience.
Kimberly-Clark tried to move their headquarters to New Jersey, and then that was a flub, and I believe they're still back in East Roswell. They're here, and they were here for a long time, and they're like, we're really going to kick things up a notch. We're going to move up to New Jersey, and that, I think, was a tremendous loss for them, and then they're right back in off 492. So
a couple companies reporting this morning, ADI up about 5%, Ben. Garmin up 15%.
Both companies just absolutely crushing it. Garmin, obviously, everyone knows those devices, but their aviation business really starting to take off. Pun intended.
That's what aviation does.
Which is good for their margins, and their guidance for next year is pretty good. And then analog devices, it's disappointing it's only up 5% because it was an absolutely killer quarter and great guidance, but they're seeing a lot of growth on the industrial side, which is their core business, but then also on the communication side, 2/3 of which is data center, and that accelerated dramatically, and so we're seeing some really good growth there, and they should have an all-time record earnings per share this year after just coming out of a pretty bad semiconductor recession. So good news for ADI.
Garmin, underrated product of the University of Tennessee. People don't talk about that, but Min Kao, who is the Min of Garmin, there's an electrical engineering building named after him because that's where he got his master's in engineering.
Who's the Gar?
That's a great question.
Garfield?
Gary Burrell, it says. Gary and Min. Much Garmin is a much better name than Gary Min.
Yeah.
So.
Or Mingar.
He went to Rensselaer Polytechnic, which is a really high. It's like the baby MIT. It's also in New York, but it's a big time engineering school.
I need to look at why they ended up being headquartered in Olathe, Texas. Olathe, Kansas.
Kansas, yeah. I don't know. I guess
it's right outside Kansas City.
Gary is from Stillwell, but he's dead. He died in 2019.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah. So I'm guessing that Gary met Min and was like, "You should come back and hang out at my house.
Yeah,
we should do some watchmaking."
You want to go look at the planes?
I guess it was GPS making at that time.
GPS, yeah.
Credit to Garmin for not getting completely market corrected by the iPhone.
They basically created GPS technology. It was really, really pretty impressive.
Yeah, I had a Garmin.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, Garmin and digital cameras.
I mean, you would have thought it would be a TomTom
things
guy.
that were very cool for like 2 years, and
Then the iPhone.
somebody said, "Hey, we can put this on a phone."
Like, we can take 10 different electronic items that all cost
Yeah,
$1,000 each and give them to you in one
yeah.
$1,200.
One device.
Yeah, one device.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Y'all have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow day.